We're on to our first presentation. Every one of these is a movement to contact. So that's the beauty of a virtual event. Paul Spinato, has he called in? Yes, so the movement to contact has worked on the first one. So our first presenter today is a French Army officer. He serves in the Preparation for the Future Section Plans Office in the French Army Headquarters. Lieutenant Colonel Promotable Martin Doithier, which I've been trained on trying to say that several times today, will be our presenter. This presentation is the one that's all audio. We will listen to Lieutenant Colonel Doithier, and then I would ask that we have questions ready for him following that. So Lieutenant Colonel Doithier has served at about every level you can in the French Army, and many of the places he has served are places where U.S. Army officers do not serve today. So it's very interesting when you look at it. Ivory Coast, French Guyana, places that the French military serves that a lot of times you don't have a lot of armies. So I think we get a great perspective from the French Army today. So if we'll mic him in, and we'll go from there.
Okay, do you hear me?
Morning.
Yeah, good morning. So, General, ladies and gentlemen, good morning from Paris.
Good morning.
So I'm very happy to be with you. Do you hear me? It's okay?
Yes.
Okay, so for the moment, the question I will try to answer with you will be how does the French Army remain competitive and agile in an increasingly complex environment? Indeed, it obviously turns out that military engagements will be ever more demanding against an adversary who is equipped with conventional military capabilities, makes the most of technological advances, both military and dual, and is able to use the cyberspace and CBRN weapons. In a context where the confrontation with an adversary who is finally able to question our superiority is difficult, the land forces will keep the decisive role to conquer the terrain in the depths of the enemy setup and in contact with the populations. But the Western technical and technological advantage, especially in the cybernetic and information domains, is already no longer a strategic premise. Future's operations will therefore be conducted in new conditions: disputed air superiority, threats of chemical, biological, nuclear, and radiological arsenals, repeated action against the nerve centers and logistics flows, enduring our PNT capabilities by the adversary, cyber insecurity. We currently see the first sign of that. The technically more demanding combats against strong armed opponents are once again likely to occur. Such a perspective implies modern and interconnected but resilient warfare capabilities able to integrate in high-intensity operations with allies and partners who themselves implement high-spectrum capabilities. That perspective required from our armies new agility and adaptability. Relying on a 2035 prospective vision based on the solid studies, the French Army adapts to the operational competition by resolutely choosing collaborative combats within a comprehensive army model. It develops an incremental program evolution logic and implements the assets to capture and rapidly integrate the innovations. I will develop now a three short parts briefing. Third part, the perspective, an uninterrupted process for the French Army. Second part, Scorpion, the fruit of the prospective approach and hardcore of network-enabled collaborative combat. And finally, third part, develop the 2040 ground combat system. So let's go with my first part. The preservation and development of a comprehensive army model are parts of a coherent prospective approach. It is indeed because the French Army starts thoughts about the future in 1999 that we'll receive the first Scorpion vehicles in 2019. We now have to go beyond the first Scorpion step and shed light on the next one. The step beginning in 2040, we will call it the 2040 Ground Combat System. It was therefore necessary to conduct a thorough study as 20 years ago, making the most of the works conducted between 2005 and 2012. This is the very purpose of the document written in the fall 2016, Future Land Action, and its capability application signed by the Chief of the French Army in January 2019. Whereas Future Land Action described the conditions of future land engagements, its capability version described the practical details and prepared the future 2040 ground combat system. As a system of ground combat systems fielded by 2040, it will integrate the joint and allied levels and will include a renewed operational superiority 20 years after Scorpion. It will also be the system of new control technological borders, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, cyber, clouds, energies, robots, virtual communications, active protection, directed energy weapons, etc. This prospective approach, renewed by the Army, directly contributes to its agility and its capacity to adapt to operational competition. In a nutshell, we conduct Scorpion while already preparing its 2040 extension, including the main ground combat system and the common indirect fire system, but also the successor of our helicopter Tigre and VBCI, armored infantry fighting vehicles. Now let's go to my second part. Scorpion, the fruit of the prospective approach and our core of network-enabled collaborative combats. The long-term strategic vision of the French Army, initiated in 1999, is getting real with the fielding of the Scorpion program in the Land Forces unit. An actual fielding as of 2019, and which will last approximately 15 years. It corresponds to our historical modernization of the French Army's capability, which will be equipped with the so-called fourth generation weapon systems. The Scorpion capability transformation is part of an overall acceleration logic of the program dynamics. Extension to new capabilities, like hybrid, recce armored, and possibly robotized vehicles, engineered combat vehicles, robots, etc., and integration of innovation. More than a mere renewing of a generation of combat platforms, it is above all a new way to fight owing to collaborative combat and protection capabilities based on an instant sharing of the tactical situation, alerts, and response proposals. The networking is nearly real-time of sensor and shooters must make it possible to renew ground combats and to provide it with unprecedented dynamics, reactivity, and devolution. To face such technological, doctrinal, and organizational tasks, Scorpion had to be envisaged in a comprehensive way. The choice made very earlier relies on a system of systems approach, tightly intermingling weapon system, electronics, information, and communication systems, while applying the constitutive pillar of a capacity: doctrine, organization, human resources, equipment, combat service support, training. Given the new capabilities provided by Scorpion and the induced tactical revolution, it was indispensable to conduct, at the same time as the program, doctrinal reflection. The Scorpion Battle Lab has been created in order to conduct doctrinal experimentations supported by simulation to have a new doctrine of deployments as of the delivery of the Scorpion equipment. The Scorpion Combat Experimentation Force is the unit in charge of supporting the Army transformation. It carries out technical, operational, as well as tactical exercises in the field, making it possible to measure the efficiency of the Scorpion Combined Arms battle groups. As of 2020, it will also enable the Army to adapt to the Scorpion combat by supporting the combat arms operational training of the units, then the pre-deployment training period of the Scorpion Combined Arm battle groups as of 2021. Beyond the Scorpion transformation, the French Army is undergoing an overall transformation of its capability spectrum with a high level of ambition. That transformation must enable us to meet the operational challenges of the next 20 years. We address this capability transition from the perspective of its end state. Which operational demand should we meet, rather than from that of the assets, with what? 4 topics emerged. First, the requirement for C2, which would be more resilient and interoperable with the Allies down to the echelon below the brigade, that is to say, the battalions, companies. That for a smoother joint and Allied maneuver. That for accurate, powerful and controlled fires, also following joint and Allied approach. Finally, that for expeditionary deployments, with all the consequences in terms of logistic footprints and first entry capabilities. Now let's turn to my third and final part, develop the 2040 ground combat system. To some extent, and in a deliberately proactive way, Scorpion already belongs to the past, since it is about to equip the land forces. Where is this future 2040 system of force leading us? We can see at least 4 key points. First, keeping and enhancing the benefits from the 4th generation of equipment in terms of network-enabled collaborative combat in order to build a network-centered system of systems which will nonetheless have to take into account more severely disputed electromagnetic and cyber environments. Introducing 5th generation systems that should be the objective of the studies of the future Death Fire system or the future manned ground combat system. That will also be objective of robotics. In order to avoid losing time in that field, ground robots will be assessed in operations outside the national territory as of 2020. Extending the capability studies and finding solutions to be able to act under a more insistent air threat, be it from manned aircraft or UAVs, under cyber threats, which will grow as the military objects are more and more connected, like those of the civilian world, under electromagnetic threats, which will have consequences, among other, on our command systems, as well as on our positioning and synchronization systems, and finally under cyber threats. Enhancing the innovation process. It is the field of the short loop innovation, asked for by our troops when they see the advances of our adversaries. For example, the UAVs used by Daesh. The French Army makes of innovation a broader phenomenon than the digital area, the data, or even the digital transformation. It also sees that it lacks some tools to innovation more rapidly. It is the ambition of its Army Battle Lab, a permanent structure dedicated to add up technical operational innovation for the forces. In that perspective, it focuses in particular on new technological domains, both in the short and long terms. Among the domains, artificial intelligence emerges as a transverse technological lead. it is tightly related to three other domains: automated system, cyber electronics and information exchanges, and network-enabled capability, actual game changers, bringing a strong operational expectation. It's now time to conclude. The durable competitivity of the French army will imply collaborative combat combining multiple effects in nearly real time, owing to the agility of its prospective reflection and its ability to integrate innovation. In a short loop to get ahead of the adversary or adapt to him as quickly as possible, all along the course of a program like Scorpion, to keep the operational superiority through the continuing upgrading of the standards of the weapon and information system on the production lines. But above all, the durable competitivity of the French army will rely on its ability to integrate in a rapid, fluid, and flexible way into any coalition, and above all into NATO, since the operational capability of an insulated nation is vain, and that, more than ever, united we stand, divided we fall. General, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes my briefing, and I am now ready to answer your questions.
Lieutenant Colonel Doithier, thank you for that presentation. Are you hearing me okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
Great. I have a couple of questions to start off with. I would encourage anybody in the room, and I know the virtual audience is being developed for questions. There's a lot of symmetry or likeness between what you describe and what we hear within Army and actually our Army and actually the U.S. Department of Defense description of modernization. So, in some ways that's good, but the first question I have for you is, with that likeness, there's still the idea of this interoperability you described. Now, I think you said in your presentation that your objective was to be interoperable to the battalion level, below brigade level. And how has the French Army thought about what that looks like between a French Army, a potential EU military force, NATO, and then a broader coalition? How do we have these very technical capabilities but still maintain interoperability at that level?
Okay, thank you for your question. For me, first answer is a technological way. Of course, if our transmission means, our PNT means cannot convert, it is very difficult. So we worked on interoperability with Scorpion, for example, with some nation like the Belgian colleagues, with whom we have signed a strategic support for the material vehicles we use. We use the same, and we train at the beginning with the same materials. But of course, we can't have all the same materials. So we have to exchange on the technical way to be connected, and the most important thing is to be able to fight again on the field. That's the main point. That's why we think that the interoperability must be at the low level, battalion level, for example. But the most difficult thing is the technological process between our system, of course.
Well, that was a very helpful response. And for the MadSci team members here, I think one of the things we should pull the string on is how the U.S. Army describes interoperability. What I just heard the French Army talk about was battalion and company level. It'd be very interesting to hear what the objective of the U.S. Army is at interoperability level. And if we could find that out from the NATO panel, we'll ask that question to see if there are different perspectives on what level, because that would be an interesting thing to talk about. One of the, another question, Lieutenant Colonel Doithier, one of the aspects of the operational environment that we have talked about is just speed. And this is speed of human interaction, this is speed of human to machine interaction, speed of machine to machine interaction, the convergences associated with that. An important part of speed is technologies and how rapidly they're becoming available. So you talked about your 2040 ground combat system, and that with that type of procurement process that we're talking about, how do we encompass the operational environment aspect of speed and convergence, but still the system and systems procurement process, which for the U.S. Army, and I think this is probably the same for most of our armies, has been much slower and has not been able to keep up with those convergences. Is that question clear to you?
Yes, very clear, and a big subject for us. That's why we have a great attempt to the innovation process, because innovation is a big studies in France for the army, but not only in the army. There is restructuration in innovation among different ministers, and the way for us is to be faster by using innovation with a short loop. That is to say, using a new technological as quick as possible to use it on the field. And then for our big programs, weapons program, this is long programs, but the new thing is to put innovation all during the many 4, 5, 10 years of a program, to put some bricks innovations with one goal, that when the vehicles or, I don't know, artillery cannon is finished by the industries, that is perfect what we want at the good time we want it, with the evolution of the situation environment. So we think that innovation will bring this possibility to go faster for our weapons or different vehicles.
Thank you. So I'm with the Army's training, U.S. Army's Training and Doctrine Command, and I have two questions. The first, one of the things which the U.S. Army very much admires about the French Army is that you have the ability to operate everywhere from low-intensity counterinsurgency in places like the Sahel to be able to participate in large-scale NATO exercises against a near-peer adversary. So within that range, the French Army has tremendous capability. The vehicle you're describing sounds extremely technical and extremely capable. When your battle lab was designing the capability, how did you develop a vehicle which could work from the low intensity like operations in the Sahel to the high intensity like operations, say, against an adversary like Russia?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question, of course. With Scorpion, we have vehicles for the, I would say, middle level of intensity. But our perspective is that the high intensity combat will come back. So we have to develop also more, I think, EV vehicles. But we have to balance between mass, of course. Mass is very important for high intensity conflicts, between mass and high technological vehicles. So we try to find a good way to have some vehicles with high technologies, but to keep some vehicles with less technologicals, which one can connect and be interoperable with some other nation who have maybe no such high technology. So it is a good question to find the good balance between heavy vehicles and more light vehicles. Of course, this is a money question. If we can have all types of vehicles, it would be perfect. But we have to make choices. Even if we have a complete model, and we will keep this complete model, we have to keep some middle vehicles and to have some more EV vehicles to adapt for counterinsurgency, you say, but also for high intensity combat that will come back in the future years.
Thank you for that. You know, it sounds like you've given this a lot of thought, so thank you for your answer. My second question has to deal with a problem which is, I think, common to every modern military, or every military which is trying to modernize. It sounds as though the Scorpion is going to be an extremely technical capability. The soldiers who will have to man it are going to have to be trained. I guess the question, will the soldiers who are going to man it have to be specially trained? Was it built with an eye towards making it very easy for a common soldier to use? And as you train them, have you guys thought about how much you will do in a simulation versus how much of the training you're actually going to do hands-on with the equipment?
Yes, thank you. This is a point, of course. For us, high technology doesn't mean complexity. We try to make high technology as simple as possible for the soldiers. We know that some too difficult systems are not used in the whole capacity by the soldiers. So we try to make Scorpion as easy to use by the soldier, by the driver, etc., as possible. But it's a real question because soldiers must adapt to these new vehicles, and soldiers must integrate this collaborative combat system, and it's not easy. That's why you mentioned simulation. Of course, Scorpion was developed with a simulation system, and we need simulation, and for simulation is a good way to prepare a real training on the field. So we try to use simulation to have more benefits of a real training on the field. That is the way we have our reflections.
Colonel Doithier, we have a number of questions from folks online who are concerned about information operations, cyber attacks, and disinformation campaigns that our adversaries are waging against us. And the concern expressed is that the Western nations are not responding. Would you care to address this, sir?
We know that cyber aspects will be more and more demanding for the soldiers on the fields. We develop, of course, some system and some means to be as efficient as possible in that field. But cyber aspect, I'm not a specialist, so I don't want to make mistakes. I just can say that cyber is a domain as of space, as of terrain, as of sea, that will be and is on the middle of our preoccupation and of reflection today.
Yes, sir. And one more from a Colonel Gomez from the Brazilian Army. He's wondering how the French Army, what they see in the future of the operational environment in South America, especially in French Guyana.
Interesting. I have the opportunity to go there to find again gold searcher, illegal gold searcher. I know that we have very good exchange in the border along the river with foreign legends, of course. I don't want to say about the political exchange because this is not my field. But I know that we are in Guyana and we continue our mission RP in Guyana to fight against illegal gold searcher. When I was there, we have some exchange with Brazilian colleagues, and that's all I can say about that.
Sir, another question. In your presentation, you did discuss the threat from chemical, biological, I think you said nuclear, radiological, which is really returning to a lot of the discussion across many of our militaries as we look again at peer competition, potential peer conflict. I wonder, as far as each of the armies' investment in how, all the things of how you operate in this environment and decontaminate in this environment, and what these very technical forces we're building, how they would operate in this environment. How is the French Army looking at resiliency in equipment and personnel to operate in this dirty environment?
Yeah, to be frank, for long periods, this domain was not a priority. With Iraq, of course, and Syria, we rediscovered that it's an important fact, of course, very important fact. So we redeveloped some materials. We retrained more efficiently in that domain. And we have good lesson learned from Iraq and other countries where such products are used. And so with lesson learned, we now for a couple of years, we train again hard. We have new materials, and it's a major topics for training today.
That's great. And sir, I have one last question, and it deals with how the operations with the French Army and what you're doing is very connected to what Mr. Greco had asked, as far as the operational range of that the French Army operates and your capabilities. Is the focus current readiness today or future readiness? As each of our armies is getting smaller, there's a lot of pressure on currently operating, which are not the peer competitor fights, but then also building the readiness of what that would take if unfortunately it happened. So how do you feel, how's that tension between being ready to go today, but building the army that might have to do something more high intensity in the future? To be ready, that is the main motto of our Army Chief of Staff, to be ready. Because the readiness is the DNA of the French Army. We want to be an expeditionary army. We have proved that with many operations in Africa, for example. And we will keep that, of course, to be ready. This is not simple, of course, but all our training capability are in that direction, to be ready to be sent all around the world with the level we have, with the means we have, but the capacity to expeditionary capacity is a main important thing for the French Army. Great. I actually have one additional question. What do you believe? And I know this is you and not a French Army position. So, what do you think the two greatest drivers of potential conflict in the future are?
For me, I start with that with my expose, but I think high intensity will come back, conflict. So we need to be very efficient altogether. And to be efficient on the field altogether, we need to be interoperable. So I know you study and you have many things on multi-domain operation, etc. But the part of interoperability is, for me, essential. We know that because we have many missions together, U.S. friends and French guys on the field, we have the mentality to fight together. Now we need interoperable means, assets, weapons, vehicles to be more and more efficient on the field.
Thank you, Lieutenant Doithier. We appreciate your presentation today. We are proclaiming you an Army mad scientist, and you'll receive your documentation to that in the mail. We'll work with you to get make sure we have your address and everything to send you a few additional pieces. Also, really in awe of your ability to do this and answer complex questions in English. So we really appreciate you doing that, because at least me and most people in this room could not do it in French. So we really appreciate that you could do that with us today. And we really appreciate, we're here at Fort Eustis, we're about 10 miles from Yorktown. And as my boss often tells me, the greatest naval victory of the United States of America was actually a victory of the French Navy. So we think about you often as we ride around the roads, and every small town around here has a Lafayette, has a Rochambeau, or de Grasse. So we think about the French Army often around here, and the French Navy, and we appreciate the discussion today. So if there's anything else, sir, we will disconnect from you, and please continue to follow us online today. We have a survey. I don't know if you've seen it. It's at our MadSci lab. You've seen that in your emails. If you can share it with your office, and it's another way that your office there in the French Army could share your ideas with us, we would appreciate that.
Okay, thank you very much for my part. You know that my war college year is called Lafayette, so I have a lot of U.S. friends, U.S. colleagues. So thank you very much for welcoming me, and see you later on the fields or wherever. See you. Thank you.